Are you ready to go down this rabbit hole? To the men who have said, or even the women, yeah, third wave feminism. That's where things maybe started to go wrong. Or the last 10 years have really been different. Dating is all of a sudden a problem. We're about to go into the real history of where this all comes from the vantage point of experts, actual, I think, more than how we are told experts are today, people in the know back in 1958. They were already in a predicament. This is the 4th episode of diving deep into what was going on in the middle of the 20th century for men and how it led up to today. But what did the people in 1958 think led up to then? Hi, welcome back to Far From Eden. We left off right before this book that we are going through, The Decline of the American Male. We left off right as it was going to get into that history. So today will be a little bit shorter of an episode because I'm going through some health issues. I've let everybody know on the Discord, on our Discord server, and I will put the link to our Discord in the description of this video. So if you guys want to get together and talk outside of our premiere, it's a really good place to do that. And I thanked Rob Cat for starting it and D.A. Davis for helping to moderate it. So here we go. This is where we left off. This was the cliffhanger. How did the American male get into this pit of subjection, where even his masculinity is in doubt? Authorities point to a succession of steps in American history that make man's present plight seem almost inevitable. The nation's Puritan fathers started it by bringing to America the idea that the body was evil. Okay, just to touch base with where we are in the timeline. The nation's Puritans? Are we talking about the Mayflower? We're going way back. I have been saying that it is not about first wave, second wave, third wave. It's a giant tsunami. This is where these people who are, talking about men's rights and everything trace it back to, which is fascinating. Started it by bringing to America the idea that the body was evil. They gave the new American male a sense of guilt about hanky-panky. When the frontier moved westward, women became scarce, and awe and respect were added to guilt. Oh, because there were few and far between. All right. Men no longer had their pick of brides. The dowry quickly disappeared, and as Dr. Mead says, quote, women with guts became more and more acceptable. Right? If the men were desperate for the women, then, the power becomes in the women's court. So it stands to reason that the men are gonna maybe put up with more, maybe compromise more, because the women could demand it. But here's the thing. Why? Why did we do that? Why would we want to, take as much as we can from you? Why would we want to do that? And a lot of people would say, well, we wanted equal respect and we had that. We had it in our own lane. But at the first opportunity to misbehave, seems like we did. And that reminds me of a garden well before this all happened, at the opportunity to misbehave. They first won, okay. Women with guts became more and more acceptable. They first won the right to a college education in Ohio in 1833, and the right to vote in Wyoming in 1869. Let's just take a moment to point out that you don't need a college degree to be well learned, right? Women before that were not ignorant. It's not like they didn't read. It's not like they didn't have knowledge. Of course they did. They were the ones who taught their children, right? There weren't, public schools and stuff like that. So of course these women were not hidden. Education wasn't hidden from them. Maybe going to college was. And I will err on the side of there was probably good reason. The history of men, especially in certain cultures, has been always to protect women. And I know that a lot of men's rights will be like, well, why would they have that responsibility, right? But back then, women had something that was valuable to the men, right? That added to their lives. So it was a symbiotic relationship. It seems to me that it was when women started to maybe have more guts. That's a way to say it. Just a second. Sorry, I don't have a cold. I'm just riddled with inflammation. That's why my voice is weird. So don't worry. There's a plan of action. I know you guys worry. That's part of the reason I'm making a video today. Proof of life. But also I missed you guys and I wanted to dig into this and I wasn't going to read ahead. So, oh goodness, did I lose what I was saying? A symbiotic relationship. I'll remember it. This is just honest. This is, a lot of people have, perfectly edited videos and, we don't have that barrier between us. I usually err on being almost too, open, but as I said in the Discord, you guys are like brothers to me, so I'm not gonna hide part of who I am. So, especially because having MS and living under a rock helped me get to where I am with this red pill knowledge. And what I mean by that is being awake. So, I'll come back to what I was saying. Okay. Oh, yes, college. Yes. So men were protecting us from something. And anyways, they first won the right to a college education in Ohio in 1833 and the right to vote in Wyoming in 1869. They started cleaning up the men's world of saloons, brothels, and gambling halls. I wonder if those were primarily out west. I mean, Wyoming was, I would think back then, part of the frontier. I mean, the western states were barely settled. Those states, I mean, Arizona didn't become a state until I think the 20th century. I mean, we're a brand new country. We really are. So in the grand scheme of things, 1869 wasn't really that long ago when you think of history as a whole. during World War One. So we've skipped to around 1914. 1914 and is when America entered World War One. For all of our people watching from other countries. During World War One, the American woman was called to do men's work, and the door was opened wide to emancipation. In the 20s, she, quote, went on a rampage, end quote. And in a roaring, flaming decade, jobs for women, free love, feminine contraception, and women's suffrage became fair play. That sounds to me like a bunch of degeneracy. Can we just take a moment and understand what I just read here? Because listen to this sentence that I read. They started cleaning up the men's world of saloons, brothels, and gambling halls. And that was, late 1800s. Let's recognize that 1869 was Civil War for America time. I think the Civil War in America ended in 1865. So I'm sure there's a connection between the end of the Civil War, westward expansion, and this change in women. To be careful. The overlord robots are listening. And then about 50 years later-ish, the women went on a rampage. So they cleaned up the men's world, and then they issued in their degeneracy. So you're saying, hey, men, don't be degenerate and going to brothels and saloons and all this stuff. And then 50 years later, the women are doing things like that. Interesting. In the 20s, she went on a rampage. Okay. Finally, the Great Depression. So now we're in a 1930 time frame. So that's like 15 years later, 10 years later. Finally, the Great Depression gave women an economic excuse to introduce their husbands to dirty dishes and diapers. They became partners. So that's when it was, oh, we're partners. We're no longer husband and wife. You have a specific role. I have a specific role. We work together beautifully the way God designed it. Now, no. We're co-husbands. Okay. Sorry. So I am interested to know how the Great Depression made it so husbands were doing dirty diapers. It doesn't make sense to me, but maybe that's something else I need to look into. Only since the end of World War II has the American woman had a chance to consolidate her gains, relax, and enjoy her now dominant position. She discovered she didn't have to imitate men in order to rule. This was 1958. Notice how there are, I suppose, waves, within the tsunami, that each generation of women did become more like men. Because, as I said, they got rid of the saloons and brothels and all that stuff, and then they did it. It's like, let's take away what men do. And I'm not condoning brothels and saloons and this, that, and the other. I believe in sin. I believe degeneracy is bad. But I also understand humans are human. Humans have, desires, wants, and even some would say needs in the realm. And maybe that's true. And when you start sending men off to settle the West and there are few wives, that's going to lead to a shift in the power dynamic. And I would imagine that the culture that brews from there, it seems like, spread. This is also, right, isn't this around the time of the printing press? So mass media becomes a thing, and newspapers, etc. And the powers that be begin to be able to shape culture and propagandize. You don't really see how there can be propaganda before there's mass media. And isn't it interesting that when mass media, as it grows, what else grows? Feminism grows, gains power. This has been a gradual takeover of the man's role. And that means the husband's role. That means the CEO's role. It's a gradual takeover. If you've ever noticed, it seems like this day and age, there's a competition in a relationship. So partners becomes competitors. And from what I've seen, the men don't want it that way. They don't want to compete. Even nowadays, they'll say they want a partner. I don't know where that comes from and why it's bad. It's actually bad. I know what they mean by it. They want that symbiotic relationship where one has a role, the other one has a role. And I'm not saying that the woman never does things that we deem masculine in this day and age, or the man never does things that we deem feminine in this day and age. Because, where one leaves off, the other fills in, right? According to their own personalities, strengths, and weaknesses. But I think we understand that men are different than women. I hope we do. Hopefully, I'm helping to educate on how that is and help you guys really understand what's going on in our minds and how this could come to be. So they had a chance after World War II to consolidate their gains, relax, and enjoy their new, now dominant position. She discovered she didn't have to imitate men in order to rule. The feminine partner took charge, and she did so as a woman. Maybe the truth is that, as a woman, she is now winning the battle of the sexes in America. So, right, I was talking about competition, and that's exactly where they went. So far, women's victory is most complete over the better educated. Okay, wait. So far, women's victory is most complete over the better educated, higher income, and younger males. Better educated, how so? College. Who are most vulnerable to new ideas. It's like male feminists. But like all trends, that gain a toehold in these groups, this one is spreading social observer sphere through the rest of the population. So World War II ended in 1945. This book was written in 1958. So they are currently in the aftermath of World War II and the changes that were taking place. And I am of the belief, for now, until I learn more and it changes, that the downfall, the decline, the free fall really I can mark back to the end of World War II. And that's when you can get all kinds of conspiracy theories, which I'm not going to do here. What about the future? In the Natural Superiority of Women, that's a book, anthropologist Ashley Montague urges the American woman to plunge boldly onward in, quote, the sudden awareness of her strength in relation to man's weakness. Dr. John A. Schindler, physician and author of A Woman's Guide to Better Living, I've heard of that one, says, quote, the American woman is a new thing. She's like a vice president who has suddenly become president. He predicts it will take men 3 generations to become thoroughly used to her. 3 generations. What is that? Millennials? It's true. Millennials are, I want a partner, and we're equals, and there's really not that big of a difference between men and women, and equal roles in the household. Both work, both, take care of the home, use daycare. This is right. Millennials would be, because you've got the boomers, Gen X, millennials. That's the 3rd generation from here. Other commentators call on men to surrender now, to accept women's dominance and adapt to it. Women themselves seem to view their gains over men with both pleasure and contempt. Almost no one is rallying men to call a halt and make a stand. No, in fact, they're telling them not to. They're telling them it's their duty. And I would venture to guess that this is about the time that feminism infiltrates the church. I bet it is, because that is the way to influence culture, especially at this time when everybody was going to church on Sunday. Good Lord. They still in churches, you will not hear, women should submit to their husbands. You will not hear that. You will not hear women be held accountable. You'll hear men be held accountable all day long for things that they shouldn't be. Sort of like this. That's why I'm talking about the church right now, because this reminds me of the way men are expected to behave in church as it pertains to the women. And the men are told that, the Bible, women are told this too, the Bible was written a long time ago. That was a different age. They didn't understand. They didn't respect women the same back then. That is not true. It's just that we had different roles based on who we are and how we think and how we're wired. Please know that this does not mean I think men need to, man up and get married and be in subjugation to women. I do not agree with the church on that. Jesus is not a religion. Okay? Religion has been used over history to do all kinds of things, to influence all kinds of things. Of course, wouldn't the bad guys, wherever they are, whoever they are in each point in history, want to infiltrate the largest influence over culture if they could? Especially if their goal was to destroy the family. And one way to destroy the family is to subjugate the man. So when they say man up and get married, they don't mean for you to be a husband and the head of the woman, as was, told in the Garden of Eden. They don't do that. They don't say that. And I find that highly suspicious. And if they don't, those are the fundamentals, right? And we're not talking about oppression. We're just talking about the order of things, right? It's not mean. It's not meant to hurt anybody. It's not about that. But we've been propagandized to think it is. Sorry, I had to have a little rant there. He is certain that as women grow even more numerous and more dominant, we will have to invent new meanings and myths for maleness in America. New meanings and myths? Well, we did. Meaning and myths for maleness in America, because, as psychiatrist Dr. Irene Jocelyn warns, quote, we are drifting toward a social structure made up of he women and she men. My brain just exploded. That's true. That's where we are. The masculinization of women and the feminization of men. And I don't mean men like kittens and are good with babies. That's not feminine. That's a male protective instinct. That's the drive to, help more vulnerable things and care for them. That's not feminine. We've been told it is, because once again, they're mixing up what is feminine, what is masculine, away from actually biblical definitions of it. Masculine doesn't mean, oh, I'm in the gym all the time and I've got big muscles. That's not it. It's way more meaningful than that. So the stereotypes and the caricatures that we know nowadays of what's masculine and what's feminine, you can see the history of why we don't understand it today and we argue about it today. It was once upon a time set in stone. So when you get to a point in time where you can have a documentary called What is a Woman, is it any shock? Is it? No. No, it's not. And we are still barreling forward and progress. So you have to think about, what are you moving forward to? What are you progressing towards? We have the connotation that, oh, we're progressing towards better things and enlightened things. And it's like, no, we're progressing towards degeneracy and a breakdown of society and depression and, all the rest of it. Anyways, this is how we're getting there. And we have finished the first section of this book. It is divided into 3 sections. The next section is entitled, Why Is He Afraid to Be Different? By George B. Leonard Jr. So we're going to dive into a whole different angle of where the whole dichotomy was between men and women in 1958 and how they think they got there and what their prediction was for future generations, which so far have been eerily accurate. Like eerily. I'm a little freaked out at how accurate it has been. But thank you guys for joining me on this episode. I made it for almost 30 minutes. So I'm glad, and I appreciate you all. Like I said, remember the Discord link will be in the description of this video. It's also on the About section, or whatever that section is, right there on the channel. I invite you all to come in and hang out. We're trying to build community there so that everybody has a place to go. If you need to reach out, these men are so supportive of one another. It's a really good community. there are men who have been there and on all the spectrums, like as far as you guys, right? That I think would be really good to, it's totally free. It's just so you guys have a place where, if you're going through something, if you're going through the divorce right now, believe me, there are men in this community, in our chat, who have been there, have been through it. There are men who have never dated in their whole lives, and they're 30 or so, and they're facing, what is their life going to be? What is their life going to mean? How can they cope with this? And there are men where the divorce was 20 years ago. And I just want you guys to have a place where you can go and be vulnerable and share, support one another, because they don't want male spaces. They don't want you guys to talk and support one another. They want to destroy you. I'm talking about the overlords. And they use the women to do this. So please know that you're welcome there. Pop in, help us build that community. If you don't need to reach out, you might be really helpful to somebody who does. Many of you went through stuff completely alone, and you thought you were the only ones that were facing the family court or false accusations or whatever it was. And we don't have to let the men who are going through it now do it alone. Now that we know how widespread this is. Yeah, I would say more men have gone through something like this than they're willing to admit, including those men who are living the happy wife, happy life routine, in the Christian church and stuff like that. If they were very honest, and if they would allow themselves, they would know how beaten down they are, by their partner. So with that, I'm going to remind you guys to protect your peace. Always feed your own souls. And I love you guys, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.